Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Fish seem to have captured all the headlines, but does the EU's draft withdrawal agreement also point to a climb down on EU immigration, with the prospect of EU citizens who arrived during the transition period having the same rights as those who came before? Confused? Well, here's Emma Vardy with a helpful guide to what our immigration policy might look like after Brexit.
The freedom for EU citizens to come and live in the UK was always one of the most fiercely debated aspects of Brexit. And the rules we're proposing to set in future have been a key part of the negotiations. So with the help of the great map here at the National Maritime Museum, here's how it's expected to work. That key date is the 29th of March 2019, when we leave the EU. And EU citizens who've been living in the UK for 5 years by that date will be able to apply for settled status, and they'll be able to go on to apply to become British citizens. Those arriving in the UK after Britain leaves the EU will have to register with the authorities if they want to stay for longer than 3 months. For around 2 years after Brexit, during the transition period, EU citizens who arrive in the UK will also be able to apply for settled status once they've been here for 5 years. It means the free movement of people is effectively set to continue during that 2-year period after we leave the EU. But how will the rules change in future if British citizens want to visit Europe? The UK government wants to keep visa-free travel for EU citizens to the UK after Brexit and is hoping this will be reciprocated. That would mean UK citizens will still be able to visit EU countries for short periods without having to get official permission to travel. But it's all subject to agreement. What about after the Brexit transition period ends? Britain's future immigration system with the rest of the world may depend on the types of trade deals that Britain negotiates. Any trade deals with countries outside the EU may also come with demands to increase the availability of visas for citizens of that country. Currently, we don't know what form this will take, but the Home Office says it will address people's concerns about the impact of unrestricted immigration. The way our immigration rules change in future is likely to affect many sectors of the economy and is also likely to play a big part in the way the impact of Brexit is viewed in years to come.
Emma Vardy reporting that. Well, watching that was the former UKIP Deputy Chair, Suzanne Evans, and Aaron Bastani, who co-founded Novara Media and is close to Jeremy Corbyn. Welcome to both of you. Suzanne Evans, all right, we know now that freedom of movement will continue during that transition period. Is that a betrayal?
I think it's a semi-betrayal. I'm really pleased that we now have a date, at least, when the transition period is going to end, because that was always the fear, that this period seemed to go on indefinitely. I think it's quite interesting, though, that it's the EU that's put down that marker rather than us.
Yeah, slightly shorter of 2 years.
Yeah, we should have started saying there's a backstop right here from the word go. So yes, I mean, we have a government that says it wants to reduce net migration to the tens of thousands. That's clearly not going to happen now within the next 3 years. We know that immigration was a major factor in the Leave vote. And my concern is that in this 2-year period, after we've supposedly left the EU, anything could happen. What if there's another Eurozone crisis? What if unemployment gets even higher, particularly among younger people in the Eurozone? We could see a huge influx of people into this country, which our public services simply can't cope with. So while in the sense I'm very pleased that we now do have an end date, and let's for goodness sake hope this is finally the end date and this transition doesn't go on ad infinitum. But yeah, it's not what we voted for.
Right. I mean, are you welcoming the idea that freedom of movement continues during the transition?
I mean, not really. I just think the whole thing's very ambiguous. We voted, I think the referendum question was, what, 13, 14 words? We voted on leaving the European Union. We never voted on leaving the single market, whether we could be in the EEA, whatnot. Now, I'm not making that point today, but in terms of what's been consented to, it's quite limited. And so, of course, there was going to be a little bit of a delay, a bit of hesitation about precisely what Brexit meant, which more or less I think we're now finding out.
But are you happy about freedom of movement continuing?
I mean, I'm ambivalent about it. I'm a socialist. I care more about the free movement of capital than of people. I think if you have freedom of movement of people and of capital, it only means the underdevelopment of poorer countries. It means wealthier countries get even wealthier. So freedom of movement of people, it's a big thing for the left, but also we need to be talking about freedom of movement of capital, things like capital controls.
Right, but we're talking about immigration here. And beyond the transition period, are you happy, as we've heard so many times from politicians, that the UK is going to take back control of its borders, and that will mean visas? It will not mean free movement in the way we know it now.
Well, we presently don't have free movement, obviously, for people not coming from the European Union. That's merely going to be extended. And when there are elements of the left that they say, you know, this is terrible, we want...
What do you say?
Well, actually, I was a rare beast. I was a Lexiter. And I changed my mind on the basis that I thought that Juncker would make an example of us. We could have it very bad after leaving the EU, and that the question wasn't clear enough in regards to things like the EEA, in regards to the ECJ.
So you voted Brexit?
I voted Remain.
Right, OK, so you voted Remain.
But I can see the merits of leaving, absolutely.
Right, OK. I mean, in terms of taking back control, this phrase that keeps being used, there is also the option, of course, of the UK allowing more people to come from outside the EU, which they've been able to do if they wanted to. Would that be a good thing?
Well, I think, as Aaron said, you know, it's one of the grotesque things for me, and I think for UKIP and for any leaver, really, about the current system, is that we had an open door to anyone coming in from continental Europe and absolutely closed doors to people coming in from anywhere else in the world, which was grotesquely unfair.
Right. So would you like to see more people coming from outside?
Well, not necessarily more, but I think it's about quality rather than quantity, isn't it? And that's the whole point about having a controlled migration system. You can choose who you let in through your front door, just as you would in your own house. So if we need engineers, if we need scientists, if we need nurses, whatever we need, we take those skills that we need, and not just anybody who just decides one day that they want to come to Britain and doesn't have a job to go to, is going to be on benefits and so on and so forth. I
mean, it hasn't been resolved, has it, this issue, really, on immigration?
Not at all. It's really peculiar to be sitting here listening to Suzanne and Aaron. I'm wondering if the last thing you said, Suzanne, means that actually what you really want is fewer Portuguese and, you know, more people from India and Pakistan. But anyway, but the more general point is, this is peculiar because it feels to me like both of colleagues here are saying, stop the world, let's get off. I mean, actually, we need immigration because of our business. We need people to work. But this idea that somehow you can just stop it feels like a kind of siege economy.
I mean, you're ventriloquising what I'm saying. I've not ever said stop the world. What I'm saying is...
neither.
We could, for instance, I would like to see us triple the number of asylum applicants. That's probably a line that separates Suzanne and I, so we don't agree on that, for instance.
I'm not sure, actually. I think there's an issue with asylum. I think the fact that we have mass uncontrolled immigration does limit the amount of places we can give to genuine asylum seekers.
I would want to triple that.
That's also an issue.
So on a per capita basis, we're on par with the European Union. At present, that's not the case. And I fundamentally don't see why we should discriminate between people coming from the global north and the global south. I mean, that's just a basic principle of equality under the law for me.
Do you think visas, a system of visas, I mean, we have a point system anyway, but do you think sort of taking that a step further is going to somehow negatively, even more negatively affect people from the poorer parts of the world than it does from the richer?
I don't think so particularly. I don't think it will make that much of a difference. My main point is that I think we need to have, I agree, we need to have a control system, but it has to be a fair system, and it has to be a system that serves our economy and our needs. And by the way, I think, as being shown elsewhere, this is an issue across Europe. And by the way, the other 27 countries are not united on this. Hungary, Poland, so on, have a rather different view to the Germans and the French. But the key point, I think, is that I think we need to stop getting too obsessed by numbers. Because the thing that really, I think, drove the Leave vote was less than numbers, but the issue of integration and cultural relationships.
On that point,
and I think we should spend a bit more time and energy on that question.
All right. Do you think that that is still an issue? Just briefly, we haven't got much time. This issue of poor integration. Sajid Javid said he's going to tackle the root causes of integration. Will continued EU immigration inflame any of those tensions?
It's a huge issue. It is about numbers because it is about people using public services. I don't think you can entirely take numbers out of the equation. But I think part of the reason...
But the Germans have solving that by putting vast amounts of money in integration. 20 billion
Germany's
euros this year.
a much bigger country as well. And it's quite interesting. If you go to Germany, you'll see that most of their immigrants are from Europe as opposed to elsewhere in the world. But the thing is, I think integration is a massive issue. And part of the reason, I think, why immigration has got such a bad name in certain quarters, it's not because of immigrants, it's because of the inability to integrate and the way in which our culture has seemed to be changing. And that scares people.
Suzanne and Aaron, thank you very much.